In this video, we're going to start talking about dimensional analysis, which is the ability to convert from one unit to another, or a series of units to a series of units. The basic setup, we need to look at the goal. We want to go from a starting unit or units to some ending unit or units. And you'll notice that I've included plural here because sometimes you may go from, for instance, miles per hour to feet per second. So you would have two sets of units to convert. The process is to recognize where we're starting. So we might be miles per hour. Looking at multiplying a series of converting factors, and then finally getting to our ending unit or units. You'll know you're there when everything has canceled out and you're left with the units that you want. When we look at conversion factors, they are really fractions or ratios. The best way to find these are using your search engine. We'll talk about that in a moment. Some examples that I've included here: 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. We can write these as ratios because when we work with dimensional analysis, the process of converting from one unit to another requires multiplication. So in this instance, we can write 1 mile per 5,280 feet, or 5,280 feet per 1 mile. Which you use will depend on your starting unit. If we look at the next one, 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds, we can write that as 1 kg over 2.2 pounds. Or 2.2 pounds, we'll use the old hashtag to simplify, per 1 kg. Putting the 1 there is not necessary, it just helps to make sure we have our numbers. And the 1 hour equals 3,600 seconds. This is used a lot in converting speeds. So this would be 1 hour per 3,600 seconds, or 3,600 seconds per 1 hour. When looking to find conversion factors, you can go to your favorite search engine. I like going to Google, and in the search box you can type miles to feet, and then you'll see that the resulting answer is 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. And then to write those as a ratio, we can, again, depending as to what we are looking for, will dictate what we need to use in our ratio. Now, sometimes when looking for a conversion factor, in the previous one, let me go back to that, we were going miles to feet, and this gave us a nice number. And by a nice number, something easy to work with. But if I typed in feet to miles, you will see that I get kind of a weird looking decimal. Nothing wrong with that decimal, it just makes it a little difficult to work in with some of the dimensional analysis. So a lot of times what I recommend people do is swap the units. Even though you may be going to, for example, feet to miles, there's nothing saying we can't go miles to feet and use the same conversion. So try to avoid, when possible, these odd looking decimal places. So if we start with an example, our conversion, we want to know the number of inches in 2 miles. So our starting unit will be 2 miles. I'll just write starting or start. Our ending unit will be inches. So we can set this up. The process we're going to use, we're going to go from miles to feet to inches. Now, if you went to Google and typed in miles to inches or inches to miles, you could skip that middle part. So it's not required you follow this, it just depends on the units you have. So in this example, we will start with 2 miles, and now what we want to do is create our converting factors. And in this instance, we have 2. So the first one is 5,280 feet per mile. So what we want to do, whenever possible, is set them up so that we can cancel. If we stop here, our ending unit would be feet. But we don't want to do that. That's not what we want to stop at. We want it to be in inches. So we know that there are 12 inches per foot. So then we can cancel those out. And then we have 1,260,720 inches. And that is the ending unit that we wanted. But you got to be careful with units, because if I look at the first one here, I have 5 miles times 5,280 feet per mile. We cancel those out, and whatever that math would be would tell you how many feet are in 5 miles. The issue is sometimes when people use the conversion factors, they put them in the wrong order. So even though 1 mile per 5,280 feet is correct, nothing cancels. So what we actually get, the first one is correct because miles canceled out. Oops, a little mistake here. Should be feet. But the second one is a little goofy. We have 5 miles times 1 mile per 5,280 feet. So if we multiply that through, we get squared miles. Now, sometimes when you create these goofy units that don't really matter, don't make sense of the problem, they might actually be legitimate. And a square mile, if we just wrote a square mile, a little square there, 1 mile by 1 mile, that is legitimate. But in this problem, it's not. Some issues students have had, for example, they might have kilogram cubed per square inches. And again, depending on the problem we're working on, those don't make sense. So don't just cancel. Those don't cancel out properly. They actually multiply. So if we look at our first conversion, how many miles did the Nautilus travel in the book 20,000 Leagues Beneath the Sea? Well, if you go to Google, you will find that 1 league equals 3.45 miles. And we know that we can write this as 1 league. I'm going to abbreviate that LG. I don't know if that's proper, but to 3.45 miles, or 3.45 miles per 1 league. I'll write it out this time. So what do we start with? Well, our starting unit is the 20,000 leagues. We know that that's the distance we are provided. The ending unit is the miles. So we'll start with the starting unit, 20,000 leagues. And then we're going to need to do multiplication. We're going to need some fraction. Now, which of these two do we use? The goal is, at every point when we do any conversion factor, that we do cancel out a term. If I use the 1 league per 3.4 miles, 4 or 5 miles here, then we're squaring the leagues. Now, that's legitimate. It's that's an area, but not what we want to look at. So in this instance, we want to put the 3.45 miles on the top and then divide it by the 1 league. And so then if we cancel those, we're left with our ending unit of miles. And if we do the math, we get 69,000 miles. So when we work with dimensional analysis, we have a starting unit and we have a ending unit. How we get to the ending unit is by multiplying by a series of converting factors. And we will continue this on in some more videos.